everyone, and welcome back to our continued series on the glories of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Happy to be back with all of you again. First of all, let's glorify Srila Prabhupada. Shri Guru Karunamaya, Bandham Tara Padadhwaya, Prema Kalpaturu Varadhata, Diksha Mantra Harinama Yanhara Amulya Dhan, Giba Gabo Tasha Guna Gaha. I bow down to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, who is a wish-fulfilling tree of divine love for Krishna, the most munificent benefactor who initiated me into the valuable jewels of both Gayatri and Mahamantra. How can I sufficiently praise his glories? Jai Shri Prabhupada. So, today we will continue with our discussions on the Transcendental Abode of Mathura. After a recent lecture on the glories of Kartik, one devotee wrote me that although she'd heard the pastime of Mother Yashoda tying Krishna to the grinding mortar many times, she relished hearing it again. And I was thinking that's actually the nature of Krishna Katha. Srila Prabhupada would sometimes use an old English word that Krishna Katha never becomes hackneyed or old. The dictionary definition of hackneyed is lacking in freshness or originality. No, Krishna consciousness is ever fresh. Ever fresh perfectly describes how we as devotees, we never tire of hearing Krishna's pastimes. This is actually the 102nd class we've given the last 10 months on Vrindavan lore, Vrindavan Leela. 102, but I'm still speaking, you're still listening. When the sages of Naimisharanya heard the Srimad Bhagavatam from the lips of Suta Goswami, they said, Vayam tuna vitripyama uttama shloka vikrame yachtrindvatam rasa jnanam svadu pade pade. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with him relish hearing his pastimes at every moment. Actually, Srimad Bhagavatam is so potent that it captivated the heart of Shukadev Goswami, who at birth was already a self-realized soul. In fact, he was a monist. He was completely absorbed in Brahman. And as such, he just immediately left home. He was 16 at birth. But as soon as he heard the superior truth, the absolute truth, Krishna, who is the source of the Brahman, heard verses about Krishna, a few verses he heard, he came running home. So that's the power of the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam actually is the life and soul of the Vaishnavas, and in particular the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Our Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he described the Bhagavatam as spotless, the spotless Purana, Amala Purana. And he himself would hear it from his associates. I was reading the other day that Gadadhar Pandit would read Bhagavatam to Mahaprabhu at Narendra Sarovara in Jagannath Puri. And in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami lists hearing the Bhagavatam as one of the 5 essential processes or practices of devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada, he carried the Bhagavatam aboard the Jaladuta to the United States. It was like his weapon by which he conquered the world. And he would sometimes refer to his Bhaktivedanta purports on the Bhagavatam as his emotional ecstasies or transcendental ecstasies. And he made it mandatory for his followers to hear Bhagavatam daily. Wherever he went, he spoke on Bhagavatam, and sometimes he even relished hearing it from his disciples as well. He'd ask his disciples to give class. And I was remembering that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he once said that if all the books in the world were destroyed and only Srimad Bhagavatam remained, there would be no loss. If all the books in the world were destroyed and only the Bhagavatam remained, there'd be no loss. There'd only be gain. So we're so fortunate, we're so blessed. We've been discussing for so many months now from the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, Krishna's Vrindavan Leelas. We're so blessed to have this knowledge in our lives. I was remembering a verse by Chanakya Pandit where he stresses the importance of knowledge. He says, avidyam jivanam sunyam diksunyascha abandavaha putra hinam grinam sunyam sarvasunya daryadata. It's really beautiful. Life without knowledge is empty, and all directions are void for those without friends. Household life without a son is void, and for the poor, the whole world is void. So today the important line is avidyam jivanam sunyam. Life without knowledge is empty. Even of course we need material knowledge to get by so that we can chant Hare Krishna. But we're studying Rajavidya Rajaguyam. We're studying the king of education. It's priceless. And sometimes I kick myself. I'm not reading enough. I've been born and I've met my guru, my spiritual master, and he's speaking and he's writing. And why didn't I spend more time hearing from his lotus mouth or his lotus pen? It's a gift. We have to take advantage of it. Actually, Srimad Bhagavatam is so great that it's glorified in other scriptures as well. That says something. This is especially true in Padma Purana. The other day I was reading, there's a section in Padma Purana called the Bhagavata Mahatmya, wherein Narada Muni is glorifying the Bhagavatam. And whenever he appears, whenever Narada Muni appears and says anything about Krishna, we should definitely stop whatever we're doing and listen. There's a Bengali saying, when someone's speaking about an advanced devotee, they'll say, he's bhakti rakta, meaning that devotee has devotion in his blood, bhakti rakta. Some advanced devotee, oh yeah, have you heard? Yeah, he's bhakti rakta, R-A-K-T-A, rakta. That devotee has devotion in his blood. And the Radha Muni's like that. So special. We get the association of these devotees who are teaching us the Srimad Bhagavatam and living their lives as an example of the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam says, Yesam samsmara nat pumsham sadya sudyati vaigriha kim punar darshanash barsha parasochas anadbihi. One can immediately purify his entire house simply by remembering exalted personalities. To say nothing of directly seeing them, touching their lotus feet, washing their feet, or offering them places to sit. So there's one very special verse that I came across in the Bhagavata Mahatmya, in the Padma Purana, where Narada Muni glorifies the Bhagavatam. It's so beautiful, so important. He says, Sadasevya, Sadasevya, Srimad Bhagavati Katha, Yasha Shravana Matrena, Harishtitam Sametshared. Quote, this Srimad Bhagavatam Katha is always to be served, twice. Simply by listening to it, Hari enters within one's heart. So, Sada Sevya, Srimad Bhagavati Katha. The Srimad Bhagavatam literally means it must be served eternally, because seva means to serve, and sada means eternally. So sada seva, we must serve the Bhagavatam eternally. So how do you serve the book? How do you serve a book? Well, how do we serve Bhagavatam eternally? By reading it, by hearing it, and by sharing it. Any teacher knows that the best way to learn a subject is to teach it. So then someone can say, well, what happens then if I read it and I hear it and I share it? So Narada Muni very kindly answers that in the last two lines of that verse. Yasha Shravana Matrena Harichitam Samashraye. He says, just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Yasha Shravana Matrena. Matra means only, and Shravana means hearing. Just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Harichitam Samashraye. He who is our only shelter, Hari or Krishna, takes shelter in the heart of the listener. That's the benefit of speaking it or hearing it or sharing it. Harichitam Samashraye. He who is our only shelter, Hari or Krishna, he takes shelter in the heart of the listener. I read a commentary by one acharya. He said, Krishna enters the heart of the listener and he never leaves. Wow. We want to come close to Krishna. We want Krishna to come close to us, to hear Bhagavatam. Or just in general, hear Katha, Krishna Katha, like we've been doing. And then he says, in this way, Krishna is more merciful than any of his expansions. Because we're listening to the Bhagavatam, so he enters into the heart of the listener and he stays there and he never leaves. So he says Krishna is more merciful than even any of his incarnations or his expansions. And he gives a nice, a transcendental analogy to describe how Krishna is beyond just the fact that he goes into our hearts when we're listening. Krishna is even more merciful than any of his other incarnations. He gives a nice analogy. He says in Treta Yuga, Lord Ram appeared wearing shoes. Naturally, because he's a king. Kings don't walk around barefoot. They're kings. And he says, in his shoes, he stands very straight and very tall. Thus, that Acharya says, it's very hard to get the dust from Lord Ram's feet. He actually says that Ramachandra hides the dust of his feet in Treta Yuga. But then he says, Krishna, we're just speaking about how merciful Krishna is, but when Krishna appears in Dwapara Yuga, he goes barefoot everywhere because he's a cowherd boy, and thus the dust of his feet is more available. When Mother Yasoda worried about Krishna walking through the forest all day with the cows, she would sometimes say to Krishna, why don't you just wear shoes? But Krishna gave a very cute answer. He'd say, Maya, my cows don't wear sandals. Why should I wear sandals? But a deeper understanding is there in the thoughts of Krishna about the dust, why he's making that dust available to his bare feet. The Acharya says that Krishna's thinking, my devotees want the dust of my feet, so I will make it easily available to them. So he's more merciful than Ram. All glories to Ram, but we're Krishna Bhaktas. And that he's more merciful than Ram is actually stated by Srila Jiva Goswami in the beginning of his immortal Sri Sankalpa Kalpa Vriksha. The opening verse is so beautiful, especially the first line. Sri Krishna, Krishna Chaitanya, Sa Sanatana Rupaka, Gopala Raghunath Apta Vraja, Balaba Pahimam. He says, O Krishna, O Krishna Chaitanya, O Lord with an eternal form, O cowherd superior to Ram, O cowherd of Braj, please protect me. Balabha Pahimam, please protect me. But superior to Ram. So just how does Krishna make the dust of his feet easily accessible to his devotees, thus being more merciful than other incarnations? That Acharya says, well, while playing his flute, he stands in a threefold bending form with his right foot turning up and slightly outwards. You know, when Krishna's, you see his foot, right foot is outward a little bit. If you look at a painting, you'll see that. His foot is turning towards Srimati Radharani. And the Acharya says that, thus as the soft breezes in Vrindavan pass by, they catch the dust particles of Krishna's feet and spread them to the whole of mankind. Then he says, those breezes also take that foot dust and sprinkle it into the Jamuna River, which causes her hair, the hair on her body, to stand on end in the form of blossoming lotus flowers. This is poetry. So Krishna's dust is there for all of mankind. Ram, you know, he's a king, he's got his chappals on, his sandals on, standing straight. Actually, Krishna's foot dust is so amazing that the Bhagavatam says, 10th canto, 30th chapter, verse 29, and I quote, the dust of Govinda's lotus feet is so sacred that even Brahma, Shiva, and the goddess of fortune, Rama, take the dust on their heads to dispel sinful reactions. Wow. So Krishna is so merciful. But we should also say, because we're Gaura Bhaktas, Mahaprabhu is the incarnation for this age. Krishna Vardam Tusha Krishnam Shangopanga Shabharshadam Yagnai Sankirtan Prayar Yajanti Shumeda Shaha. He's coming with his astras, his weapons, like the holy name and prasadam and his devotees. And he's the Yuga avatar. So we're particular to him. We're Gaura, because without the mercy of Gaura, we can't understand Radha and Krishna. So we could say Lord Chaitanya is even more merciful than Krishna. Well, we say it because Rupa Goswami says it. Namo Maha Badanaya Krishna Prem Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namde Guru Tushaya Namaha. Who is this incarnation? Look at him. This golden avatar. He's even more merciful than Krishna. Because in the Kali Yuga, he gives Braj Bhakti. What is that? Even to this day, no one can comprehend his unfathomable mercy, although we are examples of it. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati also confirms this in his Chaitanya Chandramrita, verse number 7. He, transcendental fanatic, you could say that he's a Gaura Bhakta. So the other incarnations, of course, are important because they're also Gaura. But he has a beautiful verse where he stresses the importance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as being the most merciful. He writes, in his incarnations as Lord Ram, Narasingha, and others, he exterminated the atheist and demoniac forces. But to what degree were these acts highly beneficial and altruistic? Ram and Nrsinga. How profoundly significant were the revelations revealed by his incarnation Kapila Dev on the path of Sankhya Yoga with its philosophy and practice? And is the work of creation, maintenance, and annihilation of this cosmic manifestation carried out by his guna avatar incarnations, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, really that impressive? I'm just quoting. Furthermore, was it really so amazing that the drowning earth was reinstated in its original position after being lifted out of the waters of the Garbhodak ocean by Varahadev? In reality, how beneficial were all these great acts? We do not consider these actions to be of any great magnitude, for they fade into insignificance before Lord Gaurasundar's munificent act of freely distributing love of Krishna to all. We offer our choicest prayers to Sri Krishna Chaitanya, the crest jewel of all incarnations, who has illuminated the path to attainment of the highest ecstasy in loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the mood of conjugal love. Whew. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki. We should also mention, before we go on to Mathura, we should also consider that sometimes the Lord's representatives in this world, on the level of Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Gaur Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. They are sometimes as merciful as the Lord himself, or even more merciful than Krishna, by his grace. Take, for example, the pastime of Srila Haridas Thakur, how merciful he was. How was Haridas Thakur merciful? Well, you remember he was whipped in 22 marketplaces. And after that atrocity, Haridas Thakur was thrown into the Ganges for dead. But he later appeared walking into town, actually. And the amazing thing was that there were no whip marks on his back. I mean, 22 marketplaces. There were no whip marks on his back. So later, Lord Chaitanya called for Haridas and showed him whip marks on his back, Lord Chaitanya's back. He showed the whip marks on his back to Haridas. Haridas Thakur said, "My Lord, where did those whip marks come from?" Mahaprabhu said, "Haridas, as they were whipping you, you were chanting my name. So I embraced you from behind. So they were whipping on my back." Those were the whip marks on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's back. Haridas Thakur became greatly humbled. And then he asked Mahaprabhu an unusual question. "My Lord, what happened to those who were whipping and tormenting me?" So Mahaprabhu smiled and he said, "Oh, they all went back home, back to Godhead. They're all in Goloka Vrindavan." I mean, are we surprised? We're Gaura Bhaktas. We see miracles every day on Sankirtan, don't we? People take a book, people chant Hare Krishna, they come to the temple. That's against the laws of material nature. So when Mahaprabhu said that they all went back home, back to Godhead, they're all in Goloka Vrindavan, all the devotees present were stunned. So after a little pause, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained, and this is really amazing. He said, "Dear devotees, the intensity of Haridas Thakur's prayers for the deliverance of his tormentors was more intense than the intensity of their whipping." The intensity of Haridas Thakur's prayers for the deliverance of his tormentors was more intense than the intensity of their whipping. They were whipping hard, but Haridas was praying harder for their upliftment. And so they were all delivered by the mercy of a Vaishnava. Hari Guru Vaishnava, all important. The Lord, the spiritual master, and the Vaishnavas, according to Narottam Das Thakur. And we must take their association at all costs. We have to be as eager for Krishna consciousness as a dying man is for food, at all times. Not now and then, here and there, but how will we get that lull and that greed? By making our best effort to chant as much as we can, to get as much association as we can, to do as much service as we can, to hear Hari Katha as much as we can. Vaishnavas are very merciful. There's a beautiful verse, another favorite. It's in Hari Bhakti Vilas 10.337. Now that you have come to my house today, I have become glorified. My life has become completely successful. To be able to see a Vaishnava is as rare as the good fortune of seeing Sri Hari. I must have acquired immense piety, huge as the Meru mountain. That's why I got to see a great Vaishnava like you. Srila Prabhupada. So just consider how fortunate we are that we have Krishna's mercy, we have Lord Chaitanya's mercy, we have Prabhupada's mercy, and we have the mercy of the Vaishnavas. We live in the association of Vaishnavas. Don't think, again, that one is more important than the other, because we can't attain one without the other. By the mercy of the Vaishnavas, we understand the glories of our spiritual master, and by the glories of our spiritual master, we understand the glories of Krishna. So it's a transcendental formula, and we have it right in the palms of our hands, Adi Guru and Vaishnava. We have nothing to lament, even in the midst of these present calamities. There's discomfort, there's austerities, there's sometimes deep tragedies. But no one can take the Vaishnavas, the Guru, and Krishna away from us. No one can take the holy name. No one can take the knowledge that we've gained to the process of devotional service. So we should engage as much, take advantage of the time that we have and become fully Krishna conscious. So Hari Guru Vaishnav Bhagavata Gita. Narottam says Bhagavata Gita, not Bhagavad Gita, but Bhagavata Gita. Bhagavata means the scripture, and then Gita. So 2 times, Hari Guru Vaishnav Bhagavata Gita. Narottam glorifies the Vaishnavas. And therefore, the first thing we do when we wake up in the morning is remember our spiritual master, and we pay obeisance to the Vaishnavas, and then we see the deity. Shakale Vaishnava Pade Mora Namaskara Ichi Kichu Aparada Nahuka Amara Hoyechen Hoiben Prabhur Jato Bhakta Vrinda Bandana Kore Shabara Charanara Vinda. The great poet Devaki Nandana. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of all Vaishnavas, praying I may not commit offenses in my attempts to please them. To all Vaishnavas who have ever been, to all Vaishnavas who will ever be, I offer my obeisances to your lotus feet. Me too. To all of you. So, yes, now that we've, I guess you could say, set the scene, we've glorified our beneficiaries, those persons who have made us what we are and what we will be. We've set the scene. Let's continue on our discussion on Mathura. Where are we in Mathura? Oh yeah. How Kamsa met his fate. The killing of Kamsa. Dun, 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 dun. In our last lecture, we left off with Krishna and Balaram, wasn't it, entering the sacrificial arena after killing the elephant Kuvalyapita. Kuvalyapita. That was so interesting. Shukadeva Goswami describes in Bhagavatam that when Krishna entered into the arena, various people perceived him in various ways. Prabhupada writes, the wrestlers saw Krishna as a lightning bolt, the men of Mathura as the best of males, the women as Cupid in person, the coward men as their relative, the impious rulers as their chastiser, the parents as their child, the king of the Bhojas as death, that's Kamsa, the unintelligent as the Supreme Lord's universal form, the yogis as the absolute truth, and the Vrishnis as their supreme worshipable deity. Many more examples are given, but the acharyas say that these various perceptions of Krishna cover the entire spectrum of all rasas and mellows, direct and indirect with Krishna. There's many relationships that you can have with Krishna, variegated. Sometimes two rasas are mixed to make it more flavorful. We won't go into that now, but so the Acharyas, they conclude Krishna's Akila Rasamrita Murti. He's the reservoir of all pleasure in which exist all the mellows of devotional service. Krishna says in Gita, all of them surrender. What is that? All of them as they surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. Senior moment. So Shastra goes on to say that the arena that Krishna entered into, it was like a beehive. What does that mean? The arena where the wrestling match is going to take place, where Kamsa is there and all the people of Mathura and some of the devotees from Vrindavan. It was like a beehive. Why? Because it was abuzz with talk of Krishna's glories. I thought that was nice. It's a buzz with the talk of Krishna's glories. The people of Mathura, they were speaking about how they'd seen the two brothers break the sacrificial bow, or straighten up the hunchback Kubja, or kill Kuvalyapita. Krishna was the talk of the town. He should be the talk of every town. They also discussed what they'd heard but not seen about the Lord's pastimes in Braj. Mathura is not that far from Vrindavan. You can get there in 5 minutes by car nowadays. So they'd heard but they'd not seen about Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. They'd heard, he killed Putana, he killed Trinivarta, he lifted the Mount Govardhan. So they're all talking like that. They're so excited, you can imagine. How excited are we going to be when finally we have Krishna's darshan? There he's in front of us. And there he was for the people of Mathura. So Krishna and Balaram, they acknowledged the affection of the people by waving their arms and joining their palms. Wow, wish I was there. At the same time, the Acharyas say, they insulted Kamsa by keeping their backs towards him. They wouldn't turn in front, they kept their backs. They insulted him in that way. So after a few minutes, Krishna said to Balaram and the boys, the cowherd boys, who is this fly, Kamsa? Called him a fly. He's already halfway to heaven. We would be doing him a favor by helping him make the full trip. What do you think, boys? That's an unusual shloka, isn't it? Who is this fly, Kamsa? He's already halfway to heaven. Halfway to heaven. We should do him a favor by helping him make the full trip. What do you think, cowherd boys? So it was in a humorous way. So the cowherd boys laughed at Krishna's jokes, and the audience were talking excitedly about him. This is all going on. So Kamsa nervously, he turns to his ministers. He said, "Who were those two boys who just walked in? Who were those two boys?" Because bear in mind, there's two Leelas going on at one time. There's the Mathura Leela and the Vrindavan Leela. So Krishna left Mathura the night he appeared. So Kamsa never saw him. He just heard about him. So whatever he'd heard still wasn't enough that he could identify Krishna. So he said to his minister, who are those two boys everyone's talking about? And making his friends laugh. So Kamsa's secretary replied, they're the ones who have been creating so much havoc in your city. And Kamsa said, what's that in their hands? So his secretary said, the tusks of the dead elephant Kuvalyapita. Kamsa froze. Like that. He froze like a statue. But the praise that Krishna was getting from the people in the sacrificial arena, this big stadium, infuriated Kamsa. And he said to himself, these sinful cowherd people do not deserve my people's attention. So seeing Kamsa in so much distress, because I know how much distress he was. The other day we were talking about his dreams and the prophecy that Krishna was coming. His devoted servant, Canura was a very powerful wrestler, professional wrestler. He stood up and said, "O Krishna and Ram, you are both famed for your strength. Let us wrestle to please the king." Some discussion went on, but agreeing to the challenge, Krishna and Balaram approached the dais, or let us say the place where Kamsa was seated on his throne. They approached there, and it's described with defiant smiles, like, They drove the elephant tusks they were carrying into the ground in front of Kamsa. The acharyas say, as if driving stakes into Kamsa's heart. Then the four wrestlers paired off. There was Krishna and Balaram, and there was Canura and Mustika. Krishna was to fight with Canura, and Balaram was to fight with Mustika. And then the fight began. In Shastras, there's quite a lot of details, but in essence, as male elephants in the jungle sometimes fight over a female elephant. So sometimes they would strike one another on the chest, other times they would lift their opponents up in the air, throw them onto the ground and stamp on them with a crashing sound that drew gasps from the spectators. And at one point I was reading, Mustika hit Balaram with a closed fist. But Balaram struck him back with an open palm. Oh, that was interesting. Mustika hit Balaram with a closed fist, but Balaram hit him back with an open palm, just as hard. But so I looked into that a little more detail, and that great saintly person that we often quote these days, Srihari Suri. I learned about Srihari Suri from listening to the lectures of Radha Govinda Maharaj, and also the devotees on that panel, the GBC Shastrik Committee, they're also studying him. So I was reading Hari Suri, and he explains why Balaram, he explains this phenomenon that Mustika hit Balaram with a closed fist and Balaram hit him with an open palm. Like, why? So he says, demons have a miserly nature, thus they close their fists, which can be interpreted that they do not give charity to anyone. On the contrary, he writes, saintly souls have a charitable nature and give donations with open palms. Just like Balaram. That's a donation. Here. It's my donation to you. Donation in the sense that being hit or eventually killed by the Lord, one gets liberated. So Hari Suri, he concludes that the nature of demons and saintly souls is exactly the opposite of each other, which is true. So seeing that Krishna and Balaram were winning the fight, Kamsa started speaking incoherently, like a madman. Hari Suri says, let me remember, brave men talk with their arms, but weaklings talk with their mouths. My father used to teach me that when I was a boy in the schoolyard. He said, the bullies will want to fight with you, but they're just all talk. Just show your strength and they'll run away. Thanks, Dad. So brave men talk with their arms, while weaklings talk with their mouths. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Weaklings, the bullies, they talk with their mouths. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but your words will never hurt me. So other acharyas comment that the women present in the audience were not happy to see the two delicate boys, because although Krishna and Balaram are very powerful, they appear as very delicate young boys. Krishna's all attractive. Two delicate boys competing against professional wrestlers. Thus the women in the audience, they began, it's described, criticizing the organizers and even the king himself. But, this is really nice, while watching and focusing their attention on these two delicate boys, Krishna and Balarama, these same women became so absorbed in Krishna and Balarama's beauty, they started discussing amongst themselves. It's like a wrestling match. Oh, this is not fair, but they just being enchanted with Krishna and Balarama, their beauty, their charm, their elegance, their movements. Everything about Krishna is sweet. So these ladies in the stadium, they said, there is no place more pious than Braj, where the Supreme Lord, in the guise of a human being, plays on the flute and herds cows in the company of his brother. They're Mathura Vasis, but they're so much appreciating the Brajavasis. This is Krishna consciousness. We cannot imagine the austerities, they said, that the gopis must have endured to be able to always see the loveliness of Krishna's body and to live in his village, constantly singing his glories. Now, even though he was engaged in an intense fight, Krishna heard the ladies' praise. And what did he do? He remembered the gopis. He heard the ladies of Mathura glorifying the residents of Vrindavan, and Krishna remembered the residents of Vrindavan. So that momentary distraction where, he's engaged in a fight, but then he thinks, Braja Gopis, Sri Radhe, something like that. That gave Canura an opportunity to give Krishna a crushing blow. So Nanda Maharaj, seeing Krishna was in danger, he stood up and he called out, "Oh, my son!" And not wanting to see his father in distress, Krishna remembered that killing Kamsa was the real reason he had come to Mathura. So what did he do? He just lifted Canura into the air, twirled him around, and smashed his body to the ground. And the Shastra says, Canura's life disappeared like mist in the rising sun. Canura's life disappeared like mist in the rising sun. It's written that Balaram was, at that time, he was very much enjoying fighting with Mustika. He wasn't in any hurry to get over. He said, just like a mongoose enjoys playing with the cobra when he's killing it. But then Krishna gave him a sign, and that sign was, let's move on. So Balaram quickly sent Mustika to the abode of Yamaraj. But suddenly, 3 other wrestlers appeared. Kuta, Shala, and Toshala. Kuta, Shala, and Toshala. Be sure not to name any of your sons Kuta, Shala, or Toshala. They came out to fight with Krishna and Balaram. But it's described that all their corpses also soon decorated the arena. Nicely said. All their corpses also soon decorated the arena. A lot of killing going on here. But it's stated that these 5 dead wrestlers, Canura, Mustika, Kuta, Shala, and Toshala, all together had actually attained Krishna's mercy through a curse they received in a previous life. Yeah. They were the sons of a very Brahminical sage named Uttaya, who lived in King Indra's heavenly capital, Amaravati. They were his the sons of this Brahminical sage. But they didn't take to Brahminical life, like studying scriptures and chanting japa, and worshipping the deity. Instead, they were just interested in wrestling. And they attended, it's described, they attended Bali Maharaj's wrestling school, because there were schools and these things were taught for boys and there were different varnas. So instead of doing Brahminical activity, they did Kshatriya activity. And their father, Uttaya, he was furious that his Brahmin sons had taken up the life of Kshatriyas. So one day he just cursed the boys. So you like to wrestle? Then you become wrestlers on the earth planet. Now that's a downgrade. we're talking about Svargaloka, for whatever wonderful things we have on this earth planet, it's a downgrade from Svargaloka. So those 5 boys became wrestlers on earth. But because they were his sons, right? Blood is thicker than water, we say. In familiar family talk, we talk about family relationships. Blood is thicker than water. So because they were his sons, he told them that although they would become wicked by keeping company with the asuras and demons, in the end they would attain liberation when they touched the Lord in a wrestling match. They would become liberated when they touched the Lord in a wrestling match. So they're all gone, liberated. Then Krishna turned and he addressed Kamsa. Kamsa, now that we have dealt with your soldiers, your elephant, and wrestlers, my friends and I would like to display our skills for your highness. It's like, what? He's kind of belittling Kamsa. We're going to do a little show for you because you're the king, your highness, you're up on the throne. So what Krishna did is he called for Sridham and his other friends to assemble all in the center of the arena. The coward boys were like, yeah. They were in the bleachers, they were in the stand, they all got to run onto the field. And right in the middle there, and people are like, what's going on? Kamsa's like, what? And in celebration of Krishna and Balaram's victory over Canura and Mustika, all the cowherd boys began to dance and sing like they do in Vrindavan, right in the middle of the arena with these dead bodies everywhere. They began to dance and sing. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And a number of musicians began accompanying them. So Krishna let that go on for some time. Then he transformed all of this into a wrestling match. He had the boys pair off and wrestle in pairs for a full half hour. And he also participated, Krishna. And the crowd in the stadium went wild. And they started showering flowers upon the boys, and the demigods did too. It was like a flower festival, like they have in Chowpatty. Radhanath Swami, every year they have that flower festival where they throw flowers up to the deities' necks, and then the devotees throw flowers at each other. It became like that. There were so many flowers in the stadium. But during this whole spectacle, Kamsa was burning in rage. It's described that he watched in disbelief, in shock, as Krishna and Balaram, who had just defeated the greatest wrestlers of the time, were now losing match after match to mere cowherd boys. That's Vrindavan. Sakiras, the cowherd boys are playing, and sometimes Krishna loses, or appears to lose, for the pleasure of his friend. And it's just like, these two boys are losing, Krishna and Balaram are losing matches to the cowherd boys, but they just defeated my wrestlers. He's so embarrassed, Kamsa. So it's described, unable to tolerate being humiliated any longer, Kamsa waved his hands wildly, "Stop the musicians!" And he stood up very defiantly and he shouted, "Drive these two sons of Vasudeva out of the city. Throw Nanda Maharaj into prison. Confiscate the wealth of his people. Behead Ugrasena and Vasudeva. And wherever on the earth they may be, kill the Vrishnis, who are incarnations of my enemies, the demigods." So hearing Kamsa's cruel words and seeing how fearful Nanda Maharaj was for him and Balaram, Krishna jumped up to where Kamsa was on the dais or on the throne. It's described just as a lion leaps upon the back of an elephant. And it's described that Krishna moved so fast that the audience couldn't understand how he suddenly appeared before Kamsa. And Kamsa himself was thinking, how did this coward boy appear from the sky in front of me so quickly? So then Kamsa he started defending himself with his sword and his shield. Sometimes he would fight in the air, sometimes he would fight on the ground, all the while screaming at the Lord with every breath. This was a massive battle. So after 2 hours, Krishna had enough. And he grabbed Kamsa by the hair and threw the demon on the ground. And he jumped him and straddled his chest and beat him to death with his bare fists. Need we say more? And with that, Kamsa's body went limp. His diamond-studded crown, it fell to the ground. And the pearls on his necklaces, they scattered everywhere. And it's described that his valuable silk clothes were smeared in his own blood. This is one rasa, ghastly rasa, for remembering Krishna as our hero. So grabbing Kamsa by the hair, Krishna dragged the dead king's lifeless body around the arena as the demigods showered flowers. And the people of Mathura chanted, Jai, Jai. And as he dragged Kamsa behind him, Krishna remembered the pain the king had caused the Brajabasis. And so soon Kamsa's corpse was so bruised and so scratched that blood flowed from it in streams. So the Shastra says that gradually the crowd became convinced that, yes, Kamsa's dead. So only then did they dare say the words, Kamsa's gone, Kamsa's gone, the king is dead. And when that phrase, what the people were saying like that, Kamsa's gone, echoed throughout the arena, Krishna let go of Kamsa's body. And Shukadev Goswami then describes what was Kamsa's destination. Well, how can one imagine? He was so sinful. What was his, he must have gone to the lower regions of Yamaloka. Of course, we know the bigger story that, Jai and Vijay being cursed by the four Kumaras to come from Vaikuntha and take birth 3 times as demons. But in the context of the play, we don't want to change the movie in this particular portion here. Who can imagine what a person such as that, what his destination would be? But Krishna consciousness is always full of wonderful surprises. Shukadev Goswami says, quote, Kamsa had always been disturbed by the thought that the Supreme Lord would kill him. Therefore, when drinking, eating, moving, sleeping, or simply breathing, the king had always seen the Lord before him with the disc weapon in his hand. Thus, Kamsa achieved the rare boon of attaining a form like Krishna's. How is that? Because that's what he was always meditating on. Just like a caterpillar, ugly caterpillar, rolls up into a cocoon and meditates, you could say, on his higher self. And after some months, the cocoon opens, and there's no longer an ugly caterpillar, but a beautiful monarch butterfly flies away. So, for whatever reason, well, we know the reason, but he was always meditating on Krishna while drinking, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing. So that has an effect. Just like we have not pure hearts yet. Well, maybe some of you do, but I don't. and that has to be removed. Cheto dharpana marjana. And when it's removed, then the freedom from material desires, that's the definition of moksha, but higher than just moksha is devotional service to Krishna. So that was all achieved by Kamsa. One acharya says that even though Kamsa always thought of Krishna in fear, his intense absorption freed him of offenses. And at death, he acquired a body suited to his meditation. A body and quality like Krishna's. And after abandoning Kamsa's corpse, Krishna happily offered obeisances at the feet of Vasudeva and Devaki, and he pacified them with sweet words. Yeah. And then what did he do? Oh yeah, then he greeted other members of the Yadu dynasty. So he abandoned the corpse, then he went to Vasudeva and Devaki, then he went to members of the Yadu dynasty. And while the Lord was engaged with these relatives, the Yadu dynasty are his relatives, suddenly Kamsa's 8 brothers, he had 8 brothers, and the main brother's name was Kanka. They entered the arena with raised weapons, like, it's not over. The race isn't over till it's over. Determined to avenge the death of their brother and king. They're coming, 8 of them. But Balarama intercepted them before they could reach Krishna. It's described that he ran into their midst like a tiger entering into a herd of deer. And he quickly slayed all of them with his gigantic club. Now in the Garga Samhita, chapter 5, part 5, chapter 12, verses 13 to 19, Narada Muni says that these 8 brothers of Kamsa were all sons of a devotee of Shiva previously, named Devayaksha, who cursed them to become demons. They're all sons of a devotee of Shiva named Devayaksha, who cursed these 8 persons to become demons. Why? Because they had, how it's described, for contaminating lotus flowers he was offering to Lord Shiva. This Devayaksha was offering, lotus flowers, or going to offer lotus flowers to Lord Shiva. And these 8 boys came along, and somehow they contaminated those lotus flowers he was offering to Shiva. Oh, he became very angry. So they took birth in Krishna Lila and Mathura, and being killed by Lord Balaram, they were purified of their offense, and then they were also liberated. A lot of gory stories, but a lot of liberation today. So Hare Krishna. Mathura Dham ki. Krishna Balaram ki. So I would like to conclude our lecture, our discussion today with a song that I came across. Very beautiful song by Srila Jiva Goswami. It's called Jaya Krita Mathura Pravesha. Jaya Krita Mathura Pravesha by Srila Jiva Goswami. And we find it in his Gopal Champu, Uttara Champu 581. It's glorifying Mathura and the people of Mathura and Krishna's pastimes in Mathura. And I think this is probably our last lecture on Mathura before we move on back to Braj Leela. So what if this is a very fitting way to read a beautiful song composed by Srila Jiva Goswami. You could say a poem or a song. If you sing it, it becomes a song. And the Sanskrit's there, but it's a little bit long, so I won't read the Sanskrit, but I think I'll put this up on my Facebook page for those of you who'd like to keep it as a memento for our discussions on Mathura, so you can remember he discusses all the essential leelas and moods of Krishna's pastimes in Mathura. So it's nice to refer to it from time to time, because we want to remember these things. This is what composes or makes up our Krishna consciousness, hearing these pastimes and relishing them and remembering them. So here we go. This is Srila Jiva Goswami's Jaya Krita Mathura Pravesha from his Gopal Champu Uttara Champu. Glory to you, O Lord, who gracefully entered the opulent city of Mathura and delighted its pious people. O kind Lord, whose pastimes delighted the people of the city. O powerful hero, who enchanted the cultured women of Mathura. O Lord, who took Kamsa's garments from a washerman and bestowed your own splendor upon a humble tailor who pleased you. O Lord, who are overwhelmed with mercy for your devotees, and who gracefully fulfilled the long-cherished desire of a simple florist. O Lord, whose body a hunchback girl anointed with sandalwood paste, and who removed the girl's crookedness and made her beautiful. O Lord, who asked about the bow in Kamsa's sacrificial arena, and who brought 100 joys to the people of Mathura. O Lord, who broke the bow in Kamsa's sacrifice arena and defeated many ferocious and invisible warriors. O Lord, whose path was blocked by an elephant driver and who then cleverly killed the giant enraged elephant. O Lord, O ornament of the Bhoja dynasty, who, in your brother's company, decorated with an elephant tusk, entered the arena. O Lord, whose body was sprinkled with elephant's blood, and who was seen in different ways by different groups of people. O Lord, who remains undefeated by anyone in the universe, and who therefore easily killed the wrestlers while Kamsa looked on. O Lord, whose unprecedented powers bewildered the entire assembly, and whose graceful battle with the wrestlers charmed everyone. O Lord, who shook with anger as Kamsa offended his elders, and whose glances flashed through the arena like lightning bolts. O Lord, who playfully jumped into the royal box, causing it to wobble, and whose playful power also made Kamsa shake in fear. O Lord, who forcefully threw Kamsa from the royal box and then killed him, the greatest sinner in all three worlds. O Lord, who removed everyone's sufferings, who at once gave liberation desired by great mystics to the demon Kamsa. O Lord, who released Vasudeva and the others from their shackles. O Lord, who is always eager to please his devotees. O Lord, who proved that Kamsa was dead by dragging him all the way to Vrishanti and revealed himself to be the strongest of the strong. O Lord, who returned the kingdom to Kamsa's father, King Ugrasena, and whose fame continues to delight the entire world. O Lord, who always protects your dependents and who again brought happiness to Braja and its residents. Then he says, Jaya, 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 Jaya. He writes like that. O hero, glory, 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 glory. To you, Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Wow. That's so nice, isn't it? We actually, everything that he mentioned in that beautiful poem, that beautiful song, we discussed. But to hear it from Srila Jiva Goswami, that's the best. So, Prabhu, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to serve you by sharing and relating these wonderful pastimes of Krishna in Mathura. I'll check a little bit, but I think we've pretty much covered Mathura. And if you'd like, when we're back on Kartik Purikrama, 2021 or 2022, hopefully, let's go there and we can remember all these wonderful pastimes of Krishna in Mathura. Otherwise, we'll be back. See, what is today? Friday. Today's Friday. So you're not supposed to forget dates, but today's Friday, so we will be back with you on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Shri Shri Gaura Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Mathura Dham ki, Vrindavan Dham ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dham ki, back home, back to Godhead. Share the Bhagavatam. We hear it, we hear it, we speak it, we hear it, and we should share it. Let's share it with all the conditioned souls and take them back to the wonderful world of Krishna consciousness. In the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan Dham. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Tao Hare Bol.